Welcome back to Previously Prohibited. I'm Jenin Eunice here with my co-host Melissa Whitty and a very important guest, Naomi Wolf, who's a great friend of mine. We met during the COVID days. We were two of the few refugees from the left who dissented on the issues of COVID lockdowns and mandates and that kind of thing. We actually met in Great Barrington a little bit after the Great Barrington Declaration was written. And I think now we are both somewhat disappointed in how our newfound friends on the right have failed to live up to their claims to care about anti-authoritarianism and free speech now that it's coming, clampdowns are coming from the right. So we're here to talk with her about that and perhaps other topics. Melissa, over to you first, though.
Yeah, welcome back, guys. Thank you so much. We're so excited. I had to get all my fangirling out of Naomi before we started because I'm a huge fan, and she was really a bright beacon of light for me during COVID because there were so few strong, confident voices. Everyone was kind of tepid and measured and didn't want to overstep it, and she was like, "No, this is wrong. This is what's going on. This is why we must resist at all times," and that was so refreshing for me. So if you could, real quick, guys, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much for your comments. I know it's been like a week so far, but we had a pretty crazy week. We had a weird recording last week that hopefully we'll never have to release. And that's what's gotten us distracted. But we have some good people coming up. We have Kurt Mills coming up on Friday, which is very exciting too. So anyways, thank you so much for joining us, Naomi. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I would follow Jenin anywhere, or do whatever.
She's the best. She's the best.
It's an honor to be here and to be invited, and wonderful to meet you, Mel. Now I'm curious about what the secret recording is that you're not.
Oh yeah.
Very provocative. There's been a show called Previously Prohibited.
I know, right? Yeah.
You'll never tell us.
We'll never tell. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
All right. Well, then we can move along. Intrigued. Yes. I'm here to talk about, I don't know if I would put it quite as kind of sweepingly as your introduction, because I still would rather be at a cocktail party arguing with people on the right than people on the left. I don't feel like everyone on the right has abandoned their free speech principles, but some key figures certainly have, and notably our new administration has not had a great report card for free speech, and especially in certain painful areas having to do with protesting, Israel's policies in relation to Palestinian prisoners, Palestinian policies related to Palestine. I mean, it's such a huge subject, right? But the free speech language, which is so beautiful to hear, coming from, for instance, Vice President Vance telling Britain there won't be free trade without free speech. It's music to our ears, right? But it rings hollow as well when you've got, a Columbia professor facing deportation, deported for his views. Jenin, do you want to update me a little bit about that? Or
Yeah, so he's actually a graduate student. I think he had graduated. He is currently in ICE detention because he participated in protests at Columbia University against what Israel is doing in Gaza. He is actually on record. They have not accused him of any violent activity. There's no evidence that he's committed any violent activity, at least that they've released. He's on record saying that Jews and Palestinians need to live in peace, condemning anti-Semitism. His wife actually just gave birth yesterday to their first child, and ICE refused to let him out, on a furlough, to be present for that and to be with his newborn baby. So just very, very sad. And I mean, these are sort of, people often will say this is worse than what Biden did, the censorship policies Biden did. I'm a little reluctant to use better or worse language. It's certainly much harsher. But it's also easier. I think it's more likely to be rebuked in courts of law because it's more out in the open and it's more obvious. What Biden did was kind of behind closed doors, so he's more likely to get away with it. And you are a victim of the Biden censorship regime.
Yeah, no, that's one reason this is so painful for me. The people I voted for destroyed my career and my reputation around the world through a censorship that you've been so in the advance guard fighting with your lawsuits against the Biden administration for exactly that kind of pressure that they put on Twitter and Facebook, Twitter at that time and Facebook, to censor people like me and your clients, Dr. Bhattacharya, Dr. Kuldorf, right, and other people
Yeah.
whom you were fighting.
Yeah. Dr.
So,
Cariotti. Yeah.
yeah. So it's very ironic and sad because we were so relieved. I won't speak for you. I was relieved, believe it or not, having been a Democrat my whole life. I was delighted that, the Trump administration won because MAGA and MAHA were supposed to be for freedom of speech. So yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's also convoluted, right? The whole conversation we've just had for the last 4 minutes just is like a Rubik's cube of hypocrisy and betrayal of principle. Well, let me ask you this. What did the Columbia University graduate student or former graduate student say that is allegedly a violation of his stay in the United States? Like, what's the regulation? I know it's not exactly a law
Yeah.
because he's not a U.S. citizen, but what is the system saying he did that's bad?
So Rubio is invoking this very rarely used statute that I think is from the Cold War era, like the 1950s. And it basically allows the Secretary of State to unilaterally deem someone a threat to our foreign policy and deport them. So the theory is basically that our foreign policy is to fight anti-Semitism everywhere, including abroad, and that by advocating for Palestinian human rights, he is jeopardizing that foreign policy. And of course, a lot of what this is conflating advocacy for Palestinian human rights and against the, protesting the Israeli government actions with anti-Semitism, which is obviously, you don't need to be that intelligent to recognize those are different things. But that's what they've done. And so they're using that to deport him. It's a statute that's so rarely used. There's only one federal judicial decision on it. And it was actually, by coincidence, written by Trump's sister, Judge Barry, in the District of New Jersey. And she found the statute was unconstitutionally vague and said it couldn't be used. So it has not reached a higher court. So we'll see. I mean, this is now there are multiple people who are in ICE detention or in deportation proceedings using the same theory. Yeah. So they will obviously be testing this.
In defense of the statute itself, I actually think that it is a good statute. When it is used as under its original intent, which is to say, you have someone, maybe a disgraced politician from a foreign country who leaves and seeks refuge in the U.S., leaves his country, seeks refuge, and then we want to establish, diplomatic ties with his home country, but they're saying, no, as long as you're offering refuge to this man, we're not going to have relations with you. So yeah, we need something this person hasn't they haven't violated any US laws, but maybe we don't have something that we can kick him out on, but hey, this is actually making it hard for us to conduct foreign policy, so you have to go. That it makes sense, right? But it should be very rarely used. It should be that's only what it's used for. And like Jenin said, this has only been challenged like once in court. I think I read one where that had only ever been invoked like 3 times. And
I mean, it's not written well because it's clearly if they can use it for a situation like this, then it's far too broad.
Right, agree. But so it started out as all laws that end up being bastardized started out with probably decent intentions, and it was supposed to just be for this one thing, and people probably never in a million years imagined that they would in fact 40 years down the road, 50 years down the road, take it and then use it to shut down criticism of the state of Israel, right? I mean, I have no doubt that the people who wrote it couldn't have fathomed that, but that's where we're at, unfortunately.
So disturbing. I just want to say, and so, Mel, are you an attorney also? Forgive me for not knowing.
Nope, I'm just like a citizen journalist. Yeah. I have a degree in political science, but I was a small business owner before COVID, and my business kind of got shut down. A little bit because of COVID. It was certainly.
Oh, were you, Naomi? Right? That was.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Weren't you a small business owner too?
Yes.
Before COVID,
yeah.
Well, so. I see what you're saying, and I agree with you. I can see a situation in which, someone needs to not be here so that we can engage in foreign policy. It would be a stretch, right? I mean, you'd have to be, I don't know what,
Yeah.
a prisoner or wanted by the state elsewhere in order to jeopardize negotiations, diplomatic relations. But that is, it's so interesting. The media has covered this story very widely, and that was not made clear to me. They're so evil. The implication is that he said something like "kill the Jews,"
Yeah,
No.
he
and
didn't.
that's
That
not even what he's accused of.
they do this like sleight of hand, pro Hamas. They're conflating pro Palestine advocacy with being pro Hamas or anti Semitic. And the latest guy they arrested, it's even worse because he was actually like an active Buddhist. And he is
Yeah.
on 60 Minutes saying that he was at the protest. He heard someone say death to Jews. It turned out it wasn't even a Columbia student. It might have been, someone trying to make it look like these protests were more anti-Semitic than they were. And he went up to them and said, "Get out of here!
Like
You don't.
physically
This is not what we
confronted them.
stand for."
Wow.
Yeah. And this guy is currently sitting in ICE detention. He was arrested at his citizenship interview in Vermont. So he was in the middle. He was going to walk out a citizen, and they showed up at his citizenship interview and took him into custody. So this is just extremely
That is
shocking. Yeah.
heartbreaking. So
Yeah.
Cruel.
his crime was being at that protest.
Participating, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm
In-
sure you've heard of the woman at Tufts who just wrote an op-ed. She didn't even participate in protests. She just wrote an op-ed a year ago calling for divestment from that Tufts divest from Israel.
And to be clear, all of these people are being removed under this very limited statute. And if they had, in fact, said something in support of Hamas, provided any kind of material or anything that you could attach a value to, which of course if you were advocating on your social media or whatnot, they probably could attach a value to that for Hamas, they would be in violation of their visas. They would never have had to break this statute to begin with.
Yeah.
They would just simply be removed. So that's how we know that this is total BS, by them using this statute, right? Because if they in fact said, death to Jews, obviously, then they would just be in violation because they would be threatening the American, persons, and they could be taken out that way. So,
Well, that might still be protected speech. I mean, for a green card holder, that might still, I mean, you can definitely say that as a citizen now,
Right.
unfortunately. I mean, not unfortunately, as a free, I mean, I hope people don't say that, but as a free speech advocate, I have to say, because the
Right.
lines get blurred, I'm kind of like, people say those things. Hopefully they wouldn't.
But if you're
but-
on the student visa, right, you can't, because they could say that they were threatening the students, and then they would.
I don't know if that constitutes a threat. That's like a tough because it's not really a threat. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess one could argue about that. Death to any race. I don't know. But Naomi, I was hoping that you would talk a little bit about how you were censored. And like what happened under the Biden administration.
I will.
So crazy.
But before we move
Yeah.
on to this particular subject, I did want to share a couple of things. One is that, looking at, and I should say I'm Jewish, right? So for what it's worth, I still am very upset about all of this. Maybe even more so because like my people and my religion are being used to threaten, the most important value we have as Americans, which is freedom of speech. And that's, cynical. I mean, I think it's like weaponization of anti-Semitism in a really cynical way, or the idea of anti-Semitism. I read legislation a lot because of our platform, Daily Clout, which is a legislative platform. And I've read a ton, back to like 2017, a ton of state laws, and you may remember them, in which you couldn't have a contract with the state if you had shown support for Palestine. That was construed as anti-Semitism. So this ploy or sleight of hand of calling criticism of Israel's policies or even support for Palestine, however you define that, as anti-Semitism has been around for quite a while. And I remember reading these bills and thinking, that is so unconstitutional. I can't believe that this is a state law. I can't believe this made it, all the way through. And
Yeah.
just think about what that does. I mean, punishing a contractor, a small business, for a political view, it's so
Yeah.
tyrannical. The other thing I want to say is, believe it or not, I've been accused of repeating Hamas talking points when I gave a speech at the Oxford Union, um, basically, doing what I always do, which is saying, don't kill civilians in Gaza, don't kill civilians in Israel, leave the civilians out of it. International law says you leave the civilians out of it. Literally, that's my position. And obviously, diplomacy is better than war. Uh, I was reported by, my words were changed in Arabic speaking countries in the the audio, and I was reported in all the press in Oxford as mouthing Hamas talking points. So literally saying "don't kill civilians" got turned into Naomi Wolf is issuing Hamas talking points, which with the kinds of laws that we're talking about, or the kind of overreach, could have become very dangerous. In Britain now,
Yeah.
you probably could get a lot of trouble. Well,
Yeah.
the worm has turned. You get in more trouble for supporting Israel these days than supporting Palestine. But nonetheless, in Britain, but nonetheless, that that invasion of freedom of speech with punitive scrutiny was underway, even then. And I think those were the things I wanted to mention. Very, oh, yeah, I guess the last thing is, like, why, right? Like, there's so many other ways. If you have to show Israel some, deference, which I know because of the Israel lobby, every administration does, right? Why burn up so much political capital with MAGA and Maha, who actually care about free speech, by
Yeah.
by such transparent attacks on freedom of speech? Those are just what I wanted to say before I talk about my own censorship. Did
Yeah.
you want to say something about that, or do you want me to just forge ahead?
No, forge ahead unless Mel has something.
No, no, I absolutely agree. I kind of think of it. I know people will probably take issue with me saying this, but when I see these people and they snatch, we're criticizing the Israeli government or Israeli policy, and then they'll just kind of use some random teacher in like Topeka, Kansas, and say, "Oh, so you hate her because she's Jewish?" And it's like, no, actually, I don't even know her. I don't even know who she is. She has absolutely nothing to do with this. But you are using her almost as a like proverbial human shield to guard the Israeli government from criticism, and that really gets to me, right? Because you are using innocent people who don't have anything to do with these politics, and you're using them to deflect and say you can't criticize this foreign government because if you do, it means that you hate this random person over here, right? Because this government represents this American or whatnot, and so it just really, really gets in my craw, I guess they should, they say, whenever people do that. And I've just gotten to the point where I just call them liars and I shut them down and I block them, or I make a example out of them on my Twitter, which is what I'm like famous for, telling people.
Okay, well, I hope I'll stay on your good side.
Yeah.
Uh, wow, I haven't experienced that. Um, so I'm
Oh,
not
I
sure.
get accused of it all the time, and I try to keep my criticism strictly to the Israeli government, and I get accused of being a danger to Jewish people in America, which is just preposterous.
Who accuses you of that?
Random people, but sometimes they're big accounts too. These are all, Zionists, like very pro Zionist. So, especially because my following is almost all on the right, right? I have a big following because I do a lot of campaign finance research. And so I have a lot of classic Republicans who they have a strong support for Israel, and they take a lot of issue with someone who they agree with me on pretty much everything else, but they do not agree with me on this. And they see this as an attack on not just this foreign state. They see it as an attack on Jewish people in general, which I reject outright. I fully reject. And so, yeah, I mean, I've had many a run in. Like I said, I've got a lot of big names, but interestingly enough, I also have a lot of people who privately will come to me. They're, congressional staffers, big names, media pundits and everything, and say, I agree with you, but I can't say this out loud because I don't want to be accused of the things that you get accused of, which is just, I mean, we have to have people have to be a little bit more brave, in my opinion. They have to be more courageous, and they have to reject the idea that you cannot criticize a foreign government. Lest it be conflated with people who have nothing to do with that.
Yeah, I take your point. I mean, you know, it's also a very raw situation on both sides. I was going to say the the person who is being held in ICE detention, you know, didn't say kill the Jews, right? But when I pass groups of screaming, clearly paid, organized young people shouting at the top of their lungs, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, I literally think they don't understand what they are saying. And it has a, you know, it has a genocidal echo to me. It does, because what are you going to do with those 3 million Jewish Israelis? You know, like,
Well, I do think most people who say that mean everybody should be equal, like with
Yeah.
equal rights, and it should just be
I hope so.
a
They
land for
literally
all the
never.
people.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, they don't say things like that. You know, they like, I'm not hearing from either side, let's sit down and have some constructive diplomacy. And Janine, you and I are good
Well, that
friends,
doesn't rhyme.
right? But I mean, but this matters, right? Because
Yeah.
what happened to, and I'm sorry, I don't have his name to hand, the guy sitting in ICE detention,
Oh,
didn't
well, yeah,
happen
there are a lot of,
didn't
yeah.
happen in a vacuum. Um, it is also scary to be Jewish, right? It's scary to be Palestinian. It's also scary to be Jewish on some of those campuses where, you know, Jewish students are being told to stay in their rooms. I mean, I got shouted down outside the Royal Courts of Justice in London. I had just come out and I was supporting Mark Stein, a free speech case, ironically enough, and I wanted to give my commentary to Mark Stein's film crew, and literally these people, like, I'm sure they believe what they were doing, but they were also paid and they were on the clock. Some of them, it's been well documented, and they were screaming and screaming and screaming outside the Royal Courts of Justice. And I kept saying nicely, could you give me a chance to just, you know, give my statement? And they, for 45 minutes, they wouldn't. And I'm not saying, you know, that's not violence or intimidation, but it's I mean, Britain is very serious, right? Britain's not America, but I am hearing credible reports from eyewitnesses of pro-Palestinian protests being, you know, supported, permitted to be as kind of effusive as they want to be, as they should, right? But Jews being told, clear out, you know, you look too Jewish. I mean, literally, people are being told, you look too Jewish, go away. Or, you know, and these have historic echoes, right? So I'm just saying, like, there's a reason people freak out, like, on both sides. And the other thing, Janine and I have spoken about this, is I hear legitimately, you know, calls to for Israel to stop doing the horrific things that Israel is doing in Gaza. But I keep waiting for the same people to say, and release the hostages, and release the hostages. And, you know, that if you're going to be even-handed, be even-handed. If you're going to care about civilians, care about civilians. This whole, you know, this whole thing started because 1,200 civilians were, you know, murdered and raped. And obviously there's history.
Well, yeah, I
Obviously,
don't think I don't know if I wouldn't say that's the start. I would say it started in
Of course.
1948.
I'm sorry. You're
And
correct. It
yeah,
started in 1948. Of course, duly noted. That was badly put. I mean, this latest paroxysm of violence and, the attacks of the IDF by the IDF on the Palestinian on Gaza, right? The proximate trigger is October 7th, and we're not losing anything in terms of protecting humanity and human rights by acknowledging that, right? Like, I don't
sure.
hear any compassion for the hostages. And so that does feel to Jews who are very traumatized
Well,
by history quite
I,
like an
I,
erasure of human beings. And no human beings should be erased, right? The kids in Palestine who are being killed, the hospitals that are being bombed, no one should be erased. But that means no one, like no one on both sides.
I hear what you're saying, but I actually take a lot of exception to that because I feel that no one has shown more concern for the hostages than the people who are saying ceasefire now, deal now, make the deal, do the hostage exchange. There are in fact
I,
3,000
I literally
Palestinians
never
being.
hear people saying do the hostage exchange.
I mean, I've been saying it since October 8th. I mean, October 8th,
Either one.
2023.
Well,
Well,
okay,
I mean,
thank
I
you.
feel people say, see people say that all the time. I don't know. Maybe you just probably, I spend a lot of time on like this topic. So I see people say that all the time. I have, you know, cared and concerned, genuinely felt, uh, concern for the safety of the hostages. Like, what are they doing to them? These people, when they're doing the blockade, they're not going to be able to eat. When they're dropping, 100,000 tons of bombs, I mean, that's just as dangerous for those hostages as it is for the Palestinian children who are also, being bombed as well. So I think that the best thing that you can do, the most care that you can show for the hostages, is to say, demand a ceasefire right now. You know.
I think one of the reasons that people like me are so focused on Israel and not on Hamas is that our government is the one that's enabling Israel and not enabling Hamas. I mean, I guess there's an extent to which the Israeli government has enabled Hamas. That's another story. But we can influence our own government's policy. And like our government officials, the majority of people in our government are consistently dehumanizing Palestinians, are not, showing zero compassion while they're talking about the hostages. So I think that's like a bitter pill for me to swallow.
I appreciate that.
If our administration, I mean, either one, showed the tiniest bit of compassion for the Palestinian civilians that they do for the Israelis, I would be more focused. But it's sort of a counterbalancing. Like, there's no, I mean, the Bebas children were two children, and that's horrible. And like when children die, obviously, as a new mom, like it's the worst thing ever. I can't even imagine. But like 18,000 Palestinian children have been killed, and nobody in our government, except for a few people like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, are standing up and talking about that. So I think that like extreme disparity is
Mhm.
what makes people like me be like so focused on the Palestinian victims.
I hear you. I do. I just, to me, that region, that history, it it will not heal as long as we don't hold both populations in our hearts simultaneously.
Sure.
And I understand the instinct to say, look at this disproportionality, but I think it's hard for me to say to you at a time like this. I think that's a mistake, but I try, no matter who's, up or down or who's killed whom, always to say like both. Because no one ever, like very few people say both. Like, we have to have compassion
Sure.
for both. We have to remember both. And I just, I just think this tribal, this kind of tribalism is never going to end as long as we only have compassion for the side that we're most closely related to.
Right. I mean,
Well,
I think that like I know my own heart. I can say I have equal compassion for all human beings who suffer, but where I direct my criticism, because I have limited energy, is at the source, which I think is the United States government, which is enabling this. I mean, it's literally sending the bombs and giving all sorts of diplomatic cover and refusing to enforce international law. I mean, the ICC drew up arrest warrants for Israeli and Hamas officials. And the United States said they weren't going to enforce them with respect to Israeli officials. So I think it's that kind of one-sidedness where we're just seeing like a complete lack of concern from the powerful figures in our world that
I
really
mean,
leads to.
I really do. And that makes sense, from your point of view. This is the trouble with this conversation, right? Which is now about Israel and Palestine versus free speech, but in a way it's about free speech because we are disagreeing and openly having a constructive dialogue.
It's a civil debate. Yeah.
It's civil debate. But, I raised this with my brother, who's very active in, and he actually used to serve in the IDF, but he's very active in peace activities among civilians in Israel and Palestine. And he pointed out that the problem with ceasefire now being like is there was a ceasefire before October 7th.
Well, but there was also a blockade on Gaza and an occupation of the West Bank. So that's
and there wasn't exactly a ceasefire because there was September 26th to the 29th of 2023, Israel did conduct 3 days of air campaigns on Gaza. So, for me, it's a little hard pill to swallow when Israel is quite literally bombing Gaza. You can't say that that's a ceasefire. It's just not. It's just not. And so there's wanton violence, rained down on Gaza and the West Bank at the same time. The West Bank 2023 was the deadliest year for civilians in the West Bank.
There was an article that came out on October 6, 2023, saying it was the deadliest year for Palestinian children. So there's also the media also doesn't cover the deaths of both parties equally. So that's another reason I think people like Mel and I we're trying to counterbalance this establishment media, which,
I'm not Jewish. I'm not Palestinian. I actually don't know any Jews in real life, and I don't know any Palestinians
you don't know any Jews in real life?
Nope. In
Where'd
my whole.
That?
Well, I live in North Carolina, and there's Jews
in North Carolina. Mel.
There are Jews in North Carolina, and I've maybe met like 5 of them. In my entire county that I live in, there are over 300 Protestant churches, and there's one temple, and I live in a county of 500,000 people.
What's the name of your county?
Cumberland County.
Go ahead.
And so I don't know any Jews in real, I know like a handful, like I've met them. I can count in my head 5. Palestinian, Jenin. That's it.
Sorry, that's someone who grew up in New York.
People always. So I actually don't bring a lot of strong opinions about either group to the conversation whatsoever, and I approach it. I am somewhat of an isolationist. I do believe in a very, very limited American role in these kind of foreign conflicts. I don't believe that either side truly benefits from an outsized role of America playing in, pushing these. We have military contractors who obviously benefit greatly by pushing constant weapons on Israel, right? And Israel consumes them, and then they create this military state, which of course, fat cats in Washington and in America, they do benefit greatly from that. And they do benefit from constant conflict in the region. And so in my opinion, the U.S. should pull out. We should play a very, very limited role, if any at all. If it were up to me, we wouldn't have any troops stationed in the Middle East, period.
You're advocating intervening to...
No, I never advocate for U.S. military intervention in Israel.
Military, but you're.
Well, I understand the role that the U.S. already plays in the region. So my thing is the U.S. position should be ceasefire now, diplomacy now. That's what our position, because we are in fact involved. If I had it my way, we wouldn't be involved whatsoever.
But then you'd be not helping Jenin, because if we weren't involved at all, there would be no restraint
Well, no, we should hold Israel to the same exact standard that we would hold any other country to, and we would never. That Israel is the only country on earth that we would give this kind of diplomatic support to. You know, we use every single
Yeah,
one of our vetoes.
Mel, that what you just said, I don't think it's, I don't think it's correct, or you'd have to show me the evidence of that. And I think there are important reasons that, you know, we have a strong alliance with Israel. Important historic reasons, geopolitical reasons. You may agree with them or disagree with them, but you just can't make that sweeping kind of statement
Well,
without providing evidence. And the other thing I would say is, you know, the US didn't invent the conflict between Israel and Palestine, right? I mean, this is a conflict that goes
Well,
back.
no, Britain
well,
did.
I was going to say the Brits did, but
Well, yeah, but actually, there's been conflict between those populations. I mean, they've lived in peace in the 20s and 30s, mostly, largely, you know, multi-ethnic, multicultural society. But there were different populations wanting different outcomes with a very small piece of land, and it's a deep historic conflict. And you know, there are claims to the land that go back millennia on the part of Palestinians, and claims to the land that go back multiple millennia. I'm not playing, you know, a math game, but I think respectfully, you know, we have to acknowledge that both these populations have deep, passionate, ancient, historic ties and claims to this small piece of
well,
land, smaller than Rhode Island. And it's very simplistic to say the reason there's conflict is that, you know, fat cats in Washington are making money. Fat cats in Washington make money from conflicts around the world. They don't want peace anywhere in the world. So I just,
well, the thing is that there would be a natural alignment, right? There would be, in fact, a natural settlement if the U.S. wasn't backing Israel
that is
with.
nonsense. Are you kidding me? If the US wasn't backing Israel, the Palestinians and the Israelis would have a natural settlement. I
Yeah,
love you guys. I've gone 15 minutes over my allotted time. I respectfully, Mel, I think what you just said is absolute nonsense, very ill-informed, very ahistorical. I encourage you to read more history of the region, of both
Mel's read a
populations.
lot of history. She
All
knows a
right.
lot.
Well, I think it's nonsense to say that if it weren't for U.S. involvement, Israel and Palestine would be fine. And I
I
guess on
didn't
that
say
note,
they would be fine. I would
She didn't
say
say.
that there would it would not be this constant war. You would have a one off, all right, and then
you,
what you would see is you would see Israel have to pull back because they just don't have the
what
numbers.
do you call
Period.
the War of Independence, otherwise known as the Nakba? The U.S. wasn't even involved.
First of
But
all, the
Britain
U.S.
was.
actually did traffic arms to Israel via Nicaragua for the Nakba, and
That was also the.
all of the arms
Not,
funding
no,
came from
talk about
U.S.
1948, Mel. I'm talking about 1948.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, which all of that funding came from U.S. Jews raising the money for those arms, and they got shipped through Nicaragua to Israel.
Yeah, those are Jews. That's not. Yes, you're right. Those are Jews.
And
That
those were American nonprofits that raised all of that money.
The
I I don't
the
see how you're creating a distinction between the U.S. acting as a state with its foreign policy and Jews in 1948, which, by the way, was right after the Holocaust, trying to get weapons
I
to
it,
people, to refugees. A
the
lot of
Brit
those terrorists were
Britain sort of had more the role that I would say the U.S. assumed
exactly.
later.
That's my point.
Uh,
Anyway, we could go on
well, no,
forever.
the CIA quite literally helped traffic through Nicaragua arms to Israel. Like
I'm
this is
sure
well
you're right.
documented.
I no doubt. I haven't seen the evidence of that, but I'm sure you could provide it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there was also a grassroots, deep, profound longing, desire, intention on the part of American Jews to save the lives of refugees who had been being fed into ovens, who had shown up because of the British mandate in boats in the port of Haifa, and were trying to settle there, and were trying to buy land and then there was a partition and it was a catastrophe, but it wasn't
no one is
invented by the
denying
United States.
that Jewish people have a desire. I am not denying them, even their right to self-determination, nothing like that. But
Thank you.
when it comes down to is the fact that this is a quasi-religious war, and it's not our war. America doesn't fight those kinds of wars. We have no business being in this position.
That's fine. I don't have an argument with that, but it's just nonsense to say that if it weren't for American involvement, we'd have a natural alignment between Palestinians and Israelis. It's just not true.
You think that if the U.S. held Israel to the same exact standard that it would hold any other country that was committing such barbaric acts on an unarmed civilian population, collectively punishing 2 million people, you think if we didn't hold them to the same exact standard that we would hold anyone else to, that this wouldn't be stopping right now?
That's not what you said that I object to.
Yes, it is. If we weren't arming them, if we weren't giving them, we trade so much soft power. But it's 90% of all of the vetoes we have used on our Security Council have been for the benefit of Israel. If they weren't benefiting from that soft power.
I don't doubt that the Israel lobby is excessive and distorting our foreign policy the way that the gas and oil lobby.
Well, the American government is still responsible for its own actions.
Guys,
okay?
This has been fun. I can't get a sentence out, so I'm going to sign off. But thank you for having me on. And Jenin, love you to bits.